The crystalline spires of Valdris Prime gleamed under the twin suns, their surfaces reflecting the nervous energy that rippled through the palace corridors. Princess Keitha of the Zephyrian Empire stood motionless before the massive viewing portal in her chambers, watching the human fleet descend through the amber atmosphere like falling stars. Her reflection stared back at her from the transparent aluminum pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer with an inner light, silver hair that moved as if suspended in water, and eyes the color of deep space. At 7 feet tall, she possessed the elegant, ethereal beauty that had made her people legendary across the galaxy. Yet today, that beauty felt like a cage. "The humans have arrived, Your Highness," announced Counselor Varix, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. The elderly Zephyrian's usually composed demeanor showed cracks of uncertainty. "The marriage ceremony is set to commence at the next solar convergence." Keitha's fingers traced the edge of the portal frame, her touch leaving brief trails of bioluminescent light. "Tell me again why we are doing this, Varix. Why am I being traded like cargo to a species we barely understand?" The counselor's expression grew grave. "The hegemony grows stronger each day, Princess. Their war machines have conquered 14 star systems in the past cycle alone. The Zephyrian Empire cannot stand against them alone." He paused, studying her reaction. "The humans, they are different. In 3 years of conflict, they have not lost a single engagement against hegemony forces. This alliance through marriage will bind our peoples together. Your sacrifice will save millions of lives." Sacrifice. The word echoed in Keitha's mind as she turned away from the window. She had been raised knowing this day would come, trained from childhood to be the perfect diplomatic bride. Yet knowing and accepting were entirely different things. "What do you know of him?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "This human I am to spend my life with?" Varix consulted his data tablet, though Keitha suspected he had memorized every detail long ago. Admiral Marcus Chen of the Terran Federation Navy. Age 32 in human years. He commanded the defense of the Kepler station when the hegemony launched their surprise assault. Outnumbered 12 to 1, he not only held the station but destroyed 3 hegemony dreadnoughts in the process. A warrior, then, Keitha mused. "I suppose that is appropriate. What of his character?" "The reports are unusual, Your Highness." Varix's hesitation was telling. His crew displays absolute loyalty to him, which is remarkable given human nature. The Federation considers him their greatest naval mind, yet he has repeatedly turned down promotions that would take him away from active combat. Most curious of all, he specifically requested this assignment. Keitha's head snapped toward her counselor. "Requested it? You mean he volunteered to marry a stranger from an alien species?" "According to our intelligence sources within the Federation, yes." When the proposal for a marriage alliance was presented to their leadership, Admiral Chen immediately stepped forward. His exact words were, "I'll do whatever it takes to stop the hegemony from destroying more worlds." Before Keitha could process this information fully, the chamber's communication system activated. "Your Highness," came the voice of the palace's communication officer, "the human delegation has requested permission to approach your chambers. They wish to present themselves before the ceremony." Keitha exchanged glances with Varix. This was highly unusual. Typically, the betrothed would not meet until the actual ceremony, maintaining the formal distance required by diplomatic protocol. Grant them permission, she decided, surprising herself with her curiosity about the human who would be her husband. The massive doors of her chamber slid open with barely a whisper, and 3 figures entered. 2 wore the distinctive blue uniforms of the Terran Federation Navy, their bearing military and precise. But it was the 3rd figure that captured Keitha's attention completely. Admiral Marcus Chen was shorter than any male she had ever encountered, standing only 6 feet tall by her estimation. His dark hair was cut in the practical military style, and his brown eyes held depths that reminded her of rich soil after rain. What struck her most, however, was not his appearance but the way he moved, with a controlled grace that spoke of both strength and restraint. He approached to within the respectful distance prescribed by protocol and offered a bow that was perfect in its execution of Zephyrian custom. When he spoke, his voice carried a warmth that was entirely unexpected. "Your Highness, I am Admiral Marcus Chen. I am honored to meet you and grateful for the opportunity to speak with you before our ceremony. Keitha found herself studying his face as he straightened. There was something in his expression, a genuine respect that had nothing to do with diplomatic necessity. Admiral Chen, she replied, her own voice steadier than she felt. I confess, your request to meet was unexpected. A slight smile played at the corners of his mouth. I imagine much about humans is unexpected to your people, Your Highness. We have a saying on Earth, the best partnerships are built on understanding, not obligation. I hoped we might have a chance to speak as individuals rather than representatives of our respective peoples. The boldness of this statement sent ripples of shock through the Zephyrian attendants present. Varric stepped forward slightly, his expression cautious, but Keitha raised a hand to halt any intervention. You speak of partnership, she said, circling slowly around the human admiral. Yet we both know this arrangement serves purely political purposes. I am to be your wife in name only, a symbol of unity between our species. What partnership can exist in such circumstances? Marcus turned to follow her movement, never breaking eye contact. With respect, Your Highness, I believe you underestimate both yourself and humanity. Yes, this marriage serves political purposes. But it will also create the first true bond between our species. How we handle that responsibility will determine whether our peoples fight as strangers sharing a battlefield or as true allies sharing a cause. Keitha paused in her circling, struck by something in his tone. You speak as if you believe this marriage could become something more than a diplomatic formality. I believe, Your Highness, that two people committed to something greater than themselves can achieve remarkable things together. The hegemony represents a threat to all free peoples in this galaxy. Stopping them will require sacrifices from many individuals. This marriage is one such sacrifice, but it need not be a meaningless one. The princess resumed her position facing the admiral directly. And if I were to tell you that I have no desire to be married to anyone, human or otherwise? That I have my own dreams and aspirations beyond serving as a political symbol? Marcus's expression grew thoughtful. Then, I would say that makes you exactly the kind of person who could help me understand how to make this arrangement work for both of us. I have no desire to cage a magnificent creature like yourself, Your Highness. I would rather discover how we might fly together. The metaphor was clumsy by Zephyrian standards, but something in its sincerity struck Keitha profoundly. She had expected a military mind focused solely on strategic advantage. Instead, she found herself facing a human who seemed genuinely interested in her as an individual. Tell me, Admiral, she said, settling onto one of the crystalline seats that adorned her chamber, what do you know of Zephyrian culture beyond what your diplomatic briefings contained? Marcus glanced briefly at his companions, then took a step closer. I know that your people communicate as much through bioluminescence as through words. I know that you consider touch to be the most intimate form of connection, reserved only for family and the deepest friendships. I know that your society values harmony and consensus, which makes the concept of marriage to a virtual stranger particularly difficult. He paused, then continued with evident effort. I also know that Zephyrian females are not considered property to be traded, despite what this arrangement might suggest. Your culture respects female autonomy highly, which means your agreement to this marriage represents a genuine sacrifice rather than simple obedience. Keitha's eyes widened slightly. Few outsiders understood the complexity of her position. You have done your research, Admiral. I have tried, Your Highness. Though I suspect there is much more to learn. Before Keitha could respond, the chamber's communication system activated once more. Your Highness, forgive the interruption, but we are receiving urgent communications from the outer defense grid. A hegemony scouting force has been detected approaching the system perimeter. The transformation in Marcus was immediate and complete. The thoughtful, respectful suitor vanished, replaced by a hardened military commander whose very presence seemed to charge the air around him. How many ships? He demanded, though the question was not directed at him. Keitha stood gracefully. Respond, she ordered the communication system. Long-range sensors detect 6 vessels, Your Highness. Hegemony configuration. They appear to be conducting reconnaissance of our defensive positions. Marcus turned to his companions. Commander Hayes, contact the fleet immediately. I want battle groups Alpha and Beta in defensive formation around the planet within the hour. Full combat readiness. Admiral, Katha interrupted, this is Zephyr in space. Our forces will handle any threats. Marcus's brown eyes met her blue ones, and, in that moment, she saw something that made her understand why his crews followed him with absolute loyalty. There was no arrogance in his expression, no dismissal of her people's capabilities. Instead, she saw the focused intensity of someone who had made a promise to protect something precious and would die before breaking that oath. Your Highness, he said quietly, with all due respect to your people's abilities, the hegemony has been studying Zephyrian defensive tactics for months. They know how your forces will respond. But, they have never faced human irregular warfare combined with Zephyrian technology. You are suggesting a joint operation? I am suggesting that our wedding gift to each other should be the complete destruction of every hegemony ship that dares to threaten your world. The audacity of the statement should have been insulting. Instead, Katha found herself impressed by the quiet confidence with which Marcus delivered it. More than that, she realized she wanted to see what this human could do when truly unleashed. Very well, Admiral. Show me what human tactics can accomplish. Marcus's smile was sharp and predatory. Commander Hayes, relay to Admiral Zhang, Operation Thunderbolt is authorized. All human vessels are to coordinate with Zephyrian Command for integrated defense. As his subordinates moved to carry out orders, Marcus turned back to Katha. Your Highness, would it be presumptuous to ask if you might observe the engagement from your fleet's command center? I would value your insights into Zephyrian capabilities. The request was tactical genius, Katha realized. By including her in the planning and execution, Marcus was creating the first true collaboration between their peoples. More than that, he was demonstrating that he valued her mind as much as her political importance. I believe that would be most educational, Admiral. As they prepared to leave for the command center, Varix approached Katha with obvious concern. Your Highness, is it wise to involve yourself in military operations so close to the ceremony? Katha looked back at Marcus, who was coordinating with his officers while simultaneously studying Zephyrian tactical displays with intense concentration. There was something about watching him work that shifted her perception entirely. This was not a man going through diplomatic motions. This was someone who genuinely cared about protecting her world. Counselor, she said softly, I believe this engagement may tell us far more about our future alliance than any formal ceremony ever could. The command center of the Zephyrian fleet was a marvel of crystalline technology, with tactical displays that seemed to float in midair and respond to thought as much as touch. When Katha and Marcus arrived, they found Admiral Thylex, commander of the Zephyrian home fleet, studying the approaching hegemony vessels with obvious concern. 6 ships should not pose a significant threat, Admiral Thylex was saying to his staff, but their positioning suggests they are testing our response patterns. They will report everything back to their main fleet. Marcus stepped forward, offering the traditional Zephyrian salute. Admiral Thylex, Admiral Marcus Chen of the Terran Federation. I believe our forces working together can ensure none of those ships survive to make their report. The Zephyrian admiral's expression was skeptical. Admiral Chen, I appreciate the Federation's desire to assist, but coordinating 2 completely different tactical philosophies in the heat of battle is exactly what the hegemony will never expect, Marcus finished. They have studied your tactics extensively, Admiral. They know exactly how Zephyrian forces will respond to their probe. But, they have never faced human unpredictability combined with your technological superiority. Katha watched the exchange with growing fascination. Marcus was not trying to take command or dismiss Zephyrian capabilities. Instead, he was proposing something genuinely collaborative. What do you propose? Admiral Thylex asked. Marcus gestured to the tactical display. Your ships have superior shields and energy weapons. Ours have advantages in speed and maneuverability. I suggest we use your vessels as anvils and ours as hammers. The concept was elegantly simple, yet Katha could see its potential effectiveness immediately. The Zephyrian ships would engage the hegemony scouts in traditional formation, drawing them into what appeared to be a standard defensive engagement. Meanwhile, the human ships would use their superior speed to attack from unexpected angles, striking when the enemy was focused on the Zephyrian forces. The timing would need to be perfect, Admiral Thylex mused. It will be, Marcus replied with absolute confidence. My ships have been practicing coordinated strikes for 3 years. Your technology will make them even more effective. As the two admirals worked out the details of the engagement, Keitha found herself observing Marcus with new eyes. She had expected a typical military leader, authoritative, rigid, focused solely on victory. Instead, she watched him adapt his strategies in real time based on Zephyrian capabilities, genuinely listening to Admiral Thylex's concerns and incorporating Zephyrian tactical preferences into his plans. Admiral Chen, she said during a brief pause in the planning, may I ask you something? Marcus turned to her immediately, his full attention focused on her words. Of course, Your Highness. Why does this matter so much to you? The protection of my world, I mean. You could have remained safely with your own fleet and let our forces handle this engagement. Marcus was quiet for a moment, his brown eyes studying her face with an intensity that made her skin shimmer slightly. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that suggested painful experience. Because, Your Highness, I have seen what the hegemony does to worlds they conquer. I have walked through the ruins of colonies where families lived and laughed and dreamed, only to find nothing but ash and silence. Every world we fail to protect is a failure that carries the weight of millions of lives. He paused, then continued more softly. And, because this is your world. You are about to trust me with your life and your future. The least I can do is prove that trust is not misplaced by ensuring your world survives our wedding day. The simple sincerity of the statement hit Keitha with unexpected force. This human warrior was not fighting for abstract political goals. He was fighting for her people, for her world, as if it were already his own. Contact from the hegemony vessels, announced the communication officer. They are demanding identification and requesting permission to conduct routine inspections of our defensive installations. Admiral Thylex's expression darkened. Routine inspections. They might as well demand we surrender our shield frequencies while they are at it. Marcus stepped closer to the tactical display, studying the enemy formation. Admiral, with your permission, I would like to respond to their communication. The Zephyrian commander looked surprised. What do you have in mind? Something they will not expect. Trust me. After a moment of consideration, Admiral Thylex nodded. Open a channel. The main display shifted to show the bridge of the lead hegemony vessel. The hegemony captain was a member of the Crothery species, reptilian, heavily armored, with eyes like burning coals. When he spoke, his voice carried the arrogance of a predator addressing prey. Zephyrian vessels, you will power down your weapons and allow our inspection teams aboard immediately. Failure to comply will result in the destruction of your pathetic defensive forces. Marcus stepped into view of the communication pickup, his human face calm and composed. When he spoke, his voice carried an almost casual tone that somehow managed to be more threatening than any shout. Hegemony vessel, this is Admiral Marcus Chen of the Terran Federation Navy. You have 30 seconds to leave this system before we demonstrate why humans are considered the galaxy's most dangerous species when properly motivated. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The Crothery captain's confident expression shifted to one of shock, then growing alarm. Humans? The report said a lot of things, Marcus interrupted smoothly. They probably did not mention that we really do not like it when someone threatens our friends. You now have 20 seconds. Keitha watched in amazement as the hegemony captain began frantically issuing orders to his crew. Through their own sensors, she could see the enemy ships beginning to alter course, no longer maintaining their aggressive formation. Admiral Chen, the Crothery captain said, his voice now carrying a note of respect mixed with fear, we were not aware of human presence in this system. We will withdraw immediately. No, Marcus replied, his tone still conversational. You will not withdraw. You see, you have made a critical error. You threatened Princess Keitha's world, and that makes this personal. The hegemony captain's eyes widened. Admiral, surely we can reach some accommodation. Marcus cut the communication without another word. When he turned back to the tactical display, his expression had returned to professional focus. "Admiral Phylex, are your forces ready?" The Zephyrian admiral was staring at Marcus with something approaching awe. "Admiral Chen, in 30 years of military service, I have never seen anything quite like that. You turned a reconnaissance mission into a rout with nothing but words." "Not quite," Marcus replied grimly. "They are regrouping. Look at their formation." Keitha studied the display and realized Marcus was right. The initial shock had worn off, and the hegemony vessels were forming up for attack. She could see additional ships dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the system reinforcements that had been hidden until now. They used the scout force as bait, Admiral Phylex realized. They wanted us to reveal our capabilities and positions. Marcus nodded. And now we get to show them exactly what human-Zephyrian cooperation looks like. Admiral Phylex, if you would be so kind as to begin the engagement? What followed was unlike any space battle Keitha had ever witnessed. The Zephyrian vessels moved with their characteristic grace and precision, their crystalline hulls gleaming as energy cascaded across their shields. But the human ships moved like living things, darting, weaving, striking from impossible angles with a ferocity that seemed almost organic. The coordination between the two fleets was perfect. When Zephyrian vessels drew enemy fire with their superior shields, human ships appeared as if from nowhere to rake the distracted hegemony vessels with devastating crossfire. When human ships overextended themselves in their aggressive attacks, Zephyrian energy beams provided precisely timed cover. How are they coordinating so effectively? Keitha asked, watching in amazement as a human destroyer seemed to dance between the firing arcs of 3 hegemony cruisers while Zephyrian support vessels maintained perfect timing on their supporting fire. Humans excel at improvisation, Marcus replied, his attention split between the tactical display and communication with his fleet commanders. We do not fight by rigid doctrine. Every engagement is unique, every situation requires adaptation. Your people provide the stability and power, we provide the chaos and unpredictability. As if to illustrate his point, one of the human frigates suddenly accelerated directly toward a hegemony heavy cruiser, its trajectory suggesting a suicidal ramming attack. The hegemony vessel focused all its firepower on the approaching ship, only to have it veer away at the last second while a Zephyrian dreadnought's main weapon struck the cruiser's now exposed flank with devastating effect. The engagement lasted less than 20 minutes. When it was over, 12 hegemony vessels had been completely destroyed, with no losses to the combined fleet. It was the most one-sided victory in recent memory, and Keitha realized she had just witnessed something historically significant. "Admiral Phylex," Marcus said as the last enemy vessel exploded in brilliant silence, "it has been an honor fighting alongside your forces. I hope this is the first of many such collaborations." The Zephyrian admiral's response was immediate and warm. "Admiral Chen, any human fleet commander who can coordinate that level of tactical integration in his first joint engagement has my complete respect and confidence. I look forward to many more such victories." As the command staff began coordinating cleanup operations and damage assessments, Keitha found herself studying Marcus with entirely new understanding. This was not the cold, calculating political marriage she had expected. She was looking at someone who had just risked his life and his fleet to defend her world, not because duty demanded it, but because he genuinely cared about protecting what would become his family. "Admiral," she said quietly, drawing him aside from the celebration around the command center, "that was remarkable. Your people fought as if this world were their own." Marcus turned to face her fully, and Keitha saw something in his expression that made her skin shimmer with involuntary bioluminescence. "Your Highness," he said softly, "as far as I am concerned, it is." The simple statement carried implications that went far beyond military alliance or political arrangement. Keitha realized that this human had just made a declaration that changed everything about their upcoming marriage. He was not simply accepting her as a diplomatic necessity. He was choosing her world, her people, as his own. "The ceremony is in 6 hours," she said, her voice carrying a new note of curiosity rather than resignation. Marcus smiled, and this time the expression reached his eyes completely. "Then, I suppose we should make sure we are both properly prepared for what promises to be a very interesting partnership." As they left the command center together, Keitha realized that her view of the marriage had been completely transformed. She was no longer being traded to a stranger for political gain. She was about to enter into alliance with someone who had already proven he would fight for her people as fiercely as he would for his own. The ceremony ahead would not be an ending, she realized. It would be a beginning. The Great Hall of Valdris Prime had been transformed into something that bridged two worlds. Crystalline formations native to Zephyrian architecture rose alongside carefully arranged displays of Terran flowering plants, their vibrant colors creating a harmony that neither species could have imagined alone. Representatives from dozens of allied worlds filled the vast space, their varied forms creating a tapestry of galactic unity. Keitha stood in her private preparation chamber, surrounded by her ceremonial attendants as they made final adjustments to her wedding attire. The traditional Zephyrian marriage garment was a work of art, flowing fabric that seemed to capture and amplify her natural bioluminescence, creating patterns of light that shifted with her movements and emotions. Today, however, tradition had been adapted to include elements that honored her human spouse-to-be. The integration of Terran symbolic elements is quite striking, observed her primary attendant, Liara, as she adjusted the delicate chain of star metal that adorned Keitha's throat. The metal had been mined from Earth's moon and crafted by human artisans into something that complemented Zephyrian aesthetics perfectly. Keitha studied her reflection in the quantum mirror, seeing herself as if for the first time. The traditional silver of Zephyrian wedding garments had been modified with threads of deep blue, the color of Earth's oceans, Marcus had explained during their brief consultation about ceremony modifications. The effect was stunning, making her appear to carry a piece of both worlds. "Tell me honestly, Liara," Keitha said, her voice carrying a nervousness that surprised her, "how do I appear to you now? Do I still look like myself, or have I become something else entirely?" Liara paused in her work, studying the princess with the careful attention of someone who had known her since childhood. "You look like yourself, Your Highness. But, perhaps, yourself as you were meant to be. The human influences have not changed your essence, they have revealed new aspects of it." Before Keitha could explore this observation further, a soft chime indicated an incoming communication. "Your Highness," came the voice of the palace communication officer, "Admiral Chen has requested a brief private audience before the ceremony. He is waiting in the Garden of Contemplation." The request was unusual. Bride and groom traditionally remain separate until the actual ceremony, but Keitha found herself curious about what Marcus might want to discuss. "Tell the Admiral I will join him presently." The Garden of Contemplation was one of Valdris Prime's most beautiful spaces, featuring plants and crystalline formations from across the Zephyrian Empire. Gravity-defying waterfalls cascaded upward into floating pools, while bioluminescent flowers created patterns of light that shifted in response to the emotional states of visitors. Marcus stood near the central meditation pool, and Keitha was struck by how different he appeared in formal attire. Gone was the practical military uniform. Instead, he wore a ceremonial outfit that had been designed to honor both cultures, traditional human formal wear in deep black, modified with Zephyrian-style embellishments that caught and reflected light in patterns that complemented her own wedding garment. "Admiral," she said as she approached, noting how the garden's responsive flora brightened in her presence, reflecting her complex emotional state. "Marcus, please," he said, turning to face her. "I think we have moved beyond purely formal address, do you not agree?" She studied his face, noting the traces of fatigue around his eyes. "You look as though you have not slept since the engagement yesterday." Marcus's expression grew rueful. "I have been coordinating with Federation Command about expanding our joint operations with your fleet. The engagement yesterday was just the beginning. Intelligence indicates the hegemony is planning something much larger for this sector." Keitha felt a chill that had nothing to do with the garden's temperature. "How much larger?" "Large enough that our marriage alliance may determine whether this entire region of space remains free or falls under hegemony control." Marcus paused, then continued with obvious difficulty. "Keitha, I need to be completely honest with you about something. When I volunteered for this assignment, I told myself it was purely about military necessity. The alliance your people offer could tip the balance of this war decisively in favor of freedom." He moved closer to the meditation pool, its surface reflecting the light patterns that danced around them. "But, yesterday, watching you in the command center, seeing how you understood the tactical situation immediately and how your presence inspired confidence in both crews, I realized something that changes everything. Keitha's bioluminescence shifted to patterns of curiosity mixed with apprehension. What did you realize? Marcus met her eyes directly, his expression carrying an honesty that was almost painful in its intensity. I realized that I could very easily fall in love with you, if you would allow it. Not because duty demands it, not because politics requires it, but because you are remarkable in ways I never expected to find. The admission hung in the air between them like a suspended note of music. Keitha felt her light patterns shift involuntarily, betraying the emotional impact of his words even as she struggled to process them intellectually. Marcus, she said carefully, we barely know each other. What you are describing could simply be attraction born of extreme circumstances. It could be, he agreed readily. But I have been in extreme circumstances many times before, and I have never felt anything like this. He took a step closer, though still maintaining respectful distance. Keitha, I am not asking you to love me. I am simply telling you that the possibility exists, if we both choose to explore it. Before she could respond, the gentle sound of approaching footsteps announced the arrival of another person. They turned to see Counselor Varix emerging from one of the garden's side paths, his expression carefully neutral. Your Highness, Admiral Chen, forgive the interruption. The ceremony coordinators have requested your presence for final preparations. Marcus nodded, then turned back to Keitha. Whatever happens after today, he said quietly, I want you to know that I consider myself honored to stand beside you, regardless of where our relationship develops from here. As they walked together toward the Great Hall, Keitha found herself reconsidering everything about the day ahead. What had begun as a diplomatic obligation was transforming into something far more complex and, potentially wonderful. The question was whether she was prepared to allow that transformation to continue. The Great Hall had filled to capacity, with representatives from across the galaxy gathered to witness what many considered the most significant interspecies alliance in recent history. As Keitha took her position at one end of the ceremonial pathway, she could see the political importance of the moment reflected in the faces around her. Admiral Zhang of the Terran Federation sat alongside Ambassador Tvex of the Regelian Collective. Minister Yolfax of the Free Asteroid Colonies was deep in conversation with the trade representative from New Geneva. Even some former enemies had sent observers, a delegation from the Corthanian Empire, recently liberated from hegemony control, watched with obvious interest in humanity's diplomatic methods. But, as the ceremonial music began and Marcus appeared at the opposite end of the pathway, Keitha found that the political implications faded into background noise. She was looking at the man who had fought for her world as if it were his own, who had treated her as an equal partner rather than a diplomatic prize, and who had just offered her something she had never expected to receive, genuine choice in her own future. The ceremony itself was a masterwork of diplomatic choreography. Traditional Zephyrian vows were exchanged alongside human commitment rituals, creating something new that honored both cultures. When the moment came for the symbolic joining, a touch of palms that would create a brief bioluminescent bond between them, Keitha hesitated for only a moment. Marcus's hand was warm against hers, and, as their palms touched, her bioluminescence flared in patterns that caused gasps of wonder throughout the assembled crowd. But what surprised her was not the beauty of the light display, but the sense of completion that seemed to flow between them. For just a moment, she could sense his emotions as clearly as her own, his determination to protect her people, his genuine affection for her, and, underneath it all, his absolute commitment to making their partnership work. Do you accept this alliance of hearts, minds, and peoples? Asked the Zephyrian High Priest, his ancient voice carrying clearly through the vast space. I do, Keitha replied, her voice steady despite the emotions coursing through her. Do you pledge to stand together against all threats to freedom and peace? Continued the human officiant, a chaplain from the Federation Navy. We do, they replied in unison, and, as they spoke, Keitha felt the truth of those words resonate through the bioluminescent connection still linking them. The remainder of the ceremony passed in a blur of ritual and formality. When it concluded, they were no longer Princess Keitha and Admiral Chen. They were partners in the fullest sense, bound together by laws both human and Zephyrian, representatives of an alliance that could reshape the galaxy. The reception that followed was as much strategic planning session as celebration. Military leaders from both species clustered around tactical displays, discussing the implications of their successful joint operation and planning for expanded cooperation. Diplomatic representatives negotiated trade agreements and cultural exchange programs. Scientists eagerly shared theories about combining human adaptability with Zephyrian technology. Through it all, Keitha found herself studying Marcus as he moved between conversations, equally comfortable discussing fleet tactics with Admiral Thylex and cultural preservation with Zephyrian scholars. She was beginning to understand what made him such an effective leader, his ability to genuinely connect with people across vast differences in background and perspective. "You are observing your new husband quite intently," noted Ambassador Tvex, the elderly Regelian approaching with 2 glasses of ceremonial wine. Keitha accepted the offered drink, noting its deep purple color that seemed to echo the harmony of the ceremony decorations. "I am trying to understand him. Humans are more complex than I expected." "The galaxy's most dangerous species," Tvex agreed with a smile that revealed the sharp teeth characteristic of his people. "Because they refuse to remain predictable. Your Admiral Chen is a perfect example. Who else would volunteer for a diplomatic marriage, turn it into a military alliance, and somehow make both aspects stronger in the process?" Before Keitha could respond, Marcus appeared at her side, offering the traditional Zephyrian bow to Ambassador Tvex. "Ambassador, I hope you are enjoying the celebration." "Immensely, Admiral. I was just telling your wife how impressed I am with humanity's approach to alliance building." Marcus's smile carried a hint of diplomatic caution. "We believe that the strongest alliances are built on mutual respect and shared purpose rather than mere convenience." "Spoken like a true diplomat," Tvex replied approvingly. "Though I suspect you will find that marriage requires even more refined negotiation skills than interstellar politics." After the ambassador moved on to other conversations, Marcus turned to Keitha with an expression that was part amusement, part uncertainty. "How are you feeling? This cannot be easy, being the center of so much attention while processing such major life changes." Keitha considered the question seriously. "I feel unbalanced," she said finally. "Not in a negative way, but as if my entire sense of equilibrium is shifting to accommodate new possibilities I had not previously considered." "That makes sense," Marcus replied thoughtfully. "Marriage is supposed to change you, according to human understanding. The question is whether the change feels positive or threatening." Before Keitha could answer, the celebration was interrupted by the sharp chime of an emergency communication. The background noise of conversation died immediately as Admiral Thylex activated the reception hall's main communication system. "All senior officers and diplomatic representatives," came the urgent voice of the Fleet Communication Center, "we are receiving multiple hyperspace signatures at the edge of the system. Configuration unknown, but preliminary estimates suggest a force of at least 50 vessels." The transformation in the reception hall was immediate. Celebration gave way to controlled urgency as military leaders from multiple species began coordinating response plans. Marcus was instantly in command mode, but Keitha noticed that he remained beside her rather than moving immediately toward the tactical displays. 50 ships, she said quietly. "That is not a reconnaissance force." "No," Marcus agreed grimly. "That is an invasion force. And they have timed their arrival perfectly during our wedding, when our guard is supposedly down and our attention is focused on ceremony rather than defense." Admiral Thylex approached rapidly, his expression grave. "Admiral Chen, Admiral Keitha, we need both your fleets in defensive formation immediately. Intelligence indicates this may be the hegemony's main assault force for this sector." Keitha felt her new title settle around her like armor. Admiral Keitha, she was no longer just a princess participating in politics. She was a military commander responsible for defending her people. "Admiral Chen," she said formally, "I recommend we implement the joint tactical protocols we developed yesterday, but on a much larger scale." Marcus nodded approvingly. "Agreed. Admiral Thylex, how quickly can we get the combined fleet into coordinated formation?" "Both fleets are already at elevated alert status," the Zephyrian commander replied. "We can be in formation within 30 minutes. "Make it 20, Marcus said. "If this is their main force, they will not waste time with preliminary maneuvers." As the senior officers dispersed to coordinate the defense, Marcus turned to Keitha. "Admiral," he said, using her military title with obvious respect, "are you prepared for our first joint command engagement?" Keitha felt her bioluminescence shift to patterns of determination and anticipation. Yesterday's engagement had been a test of their tactical compatibility. Today would determine whether their alliance could withstand the full force of hegemony aggression. "I am prepared, Admiral," she replied. "Let us show the galaxy what human-Zephyrian cooperation can accomplish." The Fleet Command Center had been reconfigured to accommodate joint operations, with tactical displays that could process both human and Zephyrian command protocols simultaneously. When Keitha and Marcus arrived, they found their combined fleets already moving into defensive formation around Valdris Prime. "Enemy force composition is becoming clear," reported the intelligence officer. 47 hegemony vessels of various classes, including 6 heavy dreadnoughts. They are accompanied by 3 vessels of unknown configuration, possibly new hegemony allies. Marcus studied the tactical display with intense concentration. Unknown allies. That is concerning. The hegemony does not typically accept partners unless they bring significant strategic advantage. Keitha moved to the secondary display, calling up intelligence files on potential hegemony allies. What she found made her skin patterns shift to warning colors. "Marcus, look at this." The unknown vessels match reported configurations for Vorthak Dominion ships. The name sent ripples of unease through the command center staff. The Vorthak Dominion was a mysterious species that had appeared on the galactic fringe several years ago, but their military capabilities remained largely unknown. What was known was that every encounter with Vorthak forces had resulted in complete communication blackout from the engagement zone. "If the Vorthak have allied with the hegemony," Admiral Thylex said grimly, "we may be facing capabilities we have no intelligence about." Marcus was quiet for a moment, studying the enemy formation with the focused intensity Keitha was learning to recognize as his analytical mode. When he spoke, his voice carried absolute confidence. "Unknown capabilities work both ways," he said. "They know nothing about our joint tactics either. Admiral Keitha, Admiral Thylex, I propose we use that to our advantage." "What do you have in mind?" Keitha asked, though something in Marcus's expression suggested she was going to like his answer. Marcus's smile was sharp and predatory, the expression of someone who had just seen a way to turn apparent disadvantage into decisive victory. "I think it is time to show the galaxy what happens when you interrupt a human wedding." The battle that followed would be studied in military academies for generations to come. The hegemony force approached with the confidence of overwhelming numbers, expecting to crush the combined human-Zephyrian fleet through sheer weight of firepower. Instead, they encountered something unprecedented in their experience, a completely integrated combat force that fought as a single organism. The initial engagement seemed to follow traditional patterns. Zephyrian vessels moved into their characteristic defensive formation, their crystalline hulls gleaming as energy cascaded across their shields. But, as the hegemony ships closed to optimal firing range, they discovered that the rules of engagement had changed completely. Human vessels emerged from positions that should have been impossible, hiding in the sensor shadows of Zephyrian ships, masked by energy patterns that no single species could have generated. The coordination was perfect, each human ship positioned to exploit weaknesses that Zephyrian sensors had identified and tagged in real time. Phase 1 complete, Marcus announced as the first wave of hegemony attackers reeled under the unexpected assault. "Admiral Keitha, please initiate Phase 2. Keitha's hands moved across the Zephyrian command interface with fluid grace, directing her ships in maneuvers that seemed impossible. The key was the human tactical philosophy that Marcus had shared with her. Instead of fighting as separate entities providing mutual support, they were fighting as parts of a single, larger organism. When hegemony ships focused fire on advancing human vessels, Zephyrian energy weapons struck from directions the enemy had not even considered defending. When the enemy tried to exploit human ships' lighter armor, they found themselves facing perfectly coordinated crossfire that turned their numerical advantage into a liability. But it was the unknown Vorthak vessels that provided the real test of their alliance. These ships fought unlike anything either species had encountered. Their weapons seemed to phase in and out of normal spacetime, making them nearly impossible to target with conventional tactics. "Vorthak weapons are ignoring our shields completely," reported the tactical officer. "They are inflicting direct hull damage through some kind of dimensional displacement." Keitha felt a chill of fear that had nothing to do with the battle around them. Weapons that could ignore shields represented a fundamental shift in the balance of galactic power. If the hegemony had access to such technology through their Vorthack allies, no existing defense could stand against them. But Marcus was studying the enemy weapon patterns with the same intense focus he brought to every tactical problem. "Admiral Catha," he said suddenly, "do your sensors show any correlation between Vorthack weapon effectiveness and the distance from our vessels?" Catha quickly accessed the relevant data, her mind racing to understand what Marcus might be seeing. "Yes," she said after a moment of analysis. "Weapon effectiveness decreases significantly beyond optimal range, but not in the pattern we would expect from normal energy dissipation." "Because it is not energy dissipation," Marcus replied, his voice carrying the excitement of someone who had just solved a crucial puzzle. "It is dimensional displacement. Their weapons are pulling pieces of our ships into another dimensional space. But dimensional manipulation requires precise calculations that become exponentially more difficult with distance and relative motion." The implication struck Catha immediately. "If we can force them to engage at extended range while maintaining high relative velocity, their weapons become ineffective," Marcus finished. "Admiral Thylex, I need your fastest ships to execute precision strikes at maximum range while maintaining evasive patterns. Do not allow them to achieve stable targeting locks." The tactical display showed the beautiful complexity of their coordinated response. Zephyrian vessels, with their superior long-range sensors, provided targeting data while human ships used their superior speed and maneuverability to maintain optimal engagement ranges. The Vorthack ships, designed to dominate through close-range dimensional weapons, found themselves unable to close to effective range. But the real breakthrough came when one of the human frigates, damaged and unable to maintain optimal range, found itself facing direct assault from a Vorthack vessel. Instead of the expected destruction, something unprecedented happened. "Incredible," breathed the sensor officer. "The human vessel's hull is adapting to the dimensional displacement. The damage is being contained and partially reversed." Catha stared at the sensor readings in amazement. "How is that possible?" Marcus's expression combined surprise with growing understanding. "Human nanotechnology," he said. "Our ship's hull repair systems are adaptive by design. They are learning to compensate for dimensional displacement in real time." The revelation changed everything about the engagement. Human vessels, initially vulnerable to Vorthack weapons, were rapidly developing resistance. More than that, they were sharing their adaptations through their integrated combat network, meaning that every human ship in the fleet was gaining resistance to dimensional weapons. "Admiral Chen," came an urgent communication from one of the human ship commanders, "we are detecting something remarkable. Our hull systems are not just resisting the dimensional displacement, they are analyzing and beginning to replicate it." The implications were staggering. If human technology could adapt to and eventually replicate Vorthack dimensional manipulation, the balance of galactic power would shift decisively in favor of the Allied forces. But the immediate battle was far from over. The hegemony force, realizing that their advantage was slipping away, began a desperate all-out assault. Every remaining vessel converged on the Allied fleet in what could only be described as a suicidal charge. "They are trying to overwhelm us through sheer numbers," Admiral Thylex observed. "Even if we destroy 90% of their force, the remainder could still inflict significant damage." Marcus studied the tactical display, his mind racing through possibilities. Then, his expression shifted to something that made Catha realize she was about to witness something extraordinary. "Admiral Catha," he said quietly, "how much do you trust me?" The question caught her completely off guard. In the midst of the largest space battle in recent memory, with the fate of the Alliance hanging in the balance, he was asking about personal trust. "Completely," she replied without hesitation, surprising herself with the absolute certainty in her voice. Marcus's smile was brilliant and slightly terrifying. "Then, please order your ships to drop their shields and focus all power to engines. We are going to show the hegemony why humans are considered insane by most galactic standards." The order violated every principle of space combat doctrine. Dropping shields during an enemy assault was tantamount to suicide. But Catha found herself trusting not just Marcus's tactical genius, but something deeper, his understanding of when conventional wisdom needed to be abandoned entirely. "All Zephyrian vessels," she commanded, "drop shields and redirect power to engines. Prepare for emergency acceleration on Admiral Chen's mark." What happened next would be remembered as one of the most audacious maneuvers in military history. As the hegemony vessels closed to point-blank range, expecting to overwhelm the unshielded Allied ships, the combined fleet suddenly accelerated to speeds that should have been impossible for vessels of their size. The human ships, already faster than their opponents, became blurs of motion that enemy targeting systems could not track. The Zephyrian vessels, with their power redirected from shields to engines, achieved velocities that turned them into projectiles capable of inflicting massive kinetic damage. But the true genius of the maneuver was not the speed itself, it was the coordination. Every Allied vessel followed precise vectors that had been calculated to turn the entire fleet into a single, massive kinetic weapon. They did not simply ram the enemy ships, they sliced through the hegemony formation like a blade, inflicting maximum damage while minimizing their own exposure to return fire. The hegemony force, expecting a traditional defensive engagement, was completely unprepared for an assault that turned basic physics into a weapon. In less than 10 minutes, 47 enemy vessels had been reduced to drifting debris. As the Allied fleet regrouped and began damage assessment, the command center erupted in celebration. They had not simply won a defensive engagement, they had achieved a victory so decisive that it would reshape galactic politics for decades to come. But, as Keitha watched Marcus coordinate post-battle operations, she realized that the most significant change was not political or military. Standing beside him, watching him balance concern for their crews with pride in their shared accomplishment, she understood that her feelings toward her new husband had shifted from curiosity and respect to something much deeper. "Admiral," she said quietly, drawing him aside from the celebration around them, "that was remarkable. I have never seen tactical innovation at that level." Marcus turned to face her fully, his expression soft with exhaustion and relief. "We did that together, Keitha. Your trust made it possible." The use of her given name, spoken with genuine affection, sent patterns of warmth through her bioluminescence. "Marcus," she said, testing the intimacy of using his name in return, "I believe we may have created something unprecedented today." "The tactical integration?" he asked, though something in his expression suggested he understood she meant more than military cooperation. "That," she agreed, "and perhaps something else as well." Marcus stepped closer, close enough that her bioluminescent patterns reflected softly on his face. "What kind of something else?" Keitha felt her light patterns shift to colors she had never displayed in the presence of anyone outside her immediate family, deep blues and silvers that indicated profound affection and growing love. "The kind that makes me think our marriage may become much more than either of us originally expected." Marcus's smile was gentle and full of hope. "I would like that very much." As reports continued to flow in about their decisive victory, Keitha realized that she was no longer looking at a stranger who had become her husband for political necessity. She was looking at a partner who had proven himself worthy of her trust, her respect, and, quite possibly, her heart. The real adventure, she understood, was just beginning. 3 months after their wedding, Keitha stood in the observation deck of the newly constructed Joint Command Station that orbited the border between Zephyrian and human space. The station itself was a marvel of integrated engineering, crystalline Zephyrian architecture flowing seamlessly into human modular design, creating something that belonged fully to neither species yet felt completely natural to both. Through the transparent aluminum viewports, she could see the combined fleet conducting training exercises. Human and Zephyrian vessels moved in perfect coordination, executing maneuvers that would have been impossible for either species alone. The tactical innovations they had developed during their wedding day battle had been refined into an entirely new form of naval warfare that was spreading throughout the Allied forces. "The morning intelligence briefing is ready, Admiral," announced Lieutenant Commander Sarah Hayes, Marcus's former executive officer who had become the station's chief intelligence coordinator. Keitha turned from the viewport, noting how natural it had become to respond to her military title. The transition from princess to admiral had been surprisingly smooth. Her years of diplomatic training had prepared her well for the political aspects of joint command, while her natural strategic intelligence had adapted quickly to military applications. "Thank you, Commander Hayes. Has Admiral Chan returned from the reconnaissance mission?" "His shuttle is docking now," Hayes replied. "He should be in the briefing room within 10 minutes. As Keitha made her way through the station's corridors, she reflected on how much had changed in such a short time. The marriage that had begun as political necessity had evolved into something neither of them had anticipated. Their professional partnership had deepened into genuine friendship, and that friendship had grown into love so gradually that she could not identify the exact moment when her feelings had shifted. Marcus was already in the briefing room when she arrived, studying tactical displays with the focused intensity she had come to associate with serious developments. His human features were drawn with fatigue. He had been conducting reconnaissance missions personally rather than delegating them, a habit that concerned her but, which she understood came from his need to assess threats firsthand. "What did you find?" she asked without preamble, settling into the chair beside his at the briefing table. Marcus looked up from the displays, his brown eyes meeting her blue ones with an expression that was part excitement, part concern. "Something unprecedented. The hegemony is not regrouping after their defeat at Valdris Prime. They are retreating." Keitha felt her bioluminescence shift to patterns of surprise. "Retreating? That is not consistent with their historical behavior patterns." "No, it is not," Marcus agreed. "Which suggests something significant has changed. Either they have encountered a threat they consider more dangerous than continued expansion, or they are preparing something that requires consolidating their forces." Commander Hayes activated the main briefing display, showing star charts that covered the entire galactic sector. Red markers indicated confirmed hegemony positions, while blue showed allied territories. The pattern was clear: hegemony forces were pulling back toward their core systems, abandoning recently conquered territories. Long-range reconnaissance confirms withdrawals from 7 star systems, Hayes reported. In each case, they are conducting scorched earth evacuations, destroying infrastructure rather than leaving it intact for liberation forces. "They are consolidating for something major," Keitha observed, her strategic training immediately recognizing the pattern. This level of withdrawal indicates preparation for either a massive offensive elsewhere or defense against an unknown threat. Marcus nodded grimly. "My thoughts exactly. The question is whether they are preparing to strike at a target we have not anticipated, or whether something else entirely is driving their actions." Before anyone could respond, the briefing room's communication system activated with an urgent chime. "Admiral Chen, Admiral Keitha, we are receiving a priority communication from Galactic Council headquarters. Ambassador Tvex is requesting immediate conference." The holographic projection that appeared showed the familiar sharp features of the Rigelian ambassador, but his usual composed demeanor was replaced by obvious urgency. "Admirals, we have received intelligence that changes everything about the current strategic situation. The hegemony withdrawal is not preparation for offensive action against allied forces." "What have you discovered, Ambassador?" Keitha asked, though something in Tvex's expression made her skin patterns shift toward apprehensive colors. 3 days ago, long-range monitoring stations detected massive energy signatures from beyond the galactic rim. Something is approaching from intergalactic space, something large enough to be detected across impossible distances. Marcus leaned forward, his expression intense. "How large?" Tvex's response sent chills through everyone in the briefing room. "Initial estimates suggest a fleet of at least 1,000 vessels, Admiral. Possibly significantly more. The hegemony apparently detected their approach weeks ago and has been preparing defensive positions." The implications struck Keitha immediately. An extragalactic invasion force. That would explain the hegemony's behavior completely. "They are not retreating from us, they are preparing to defend against something much more threatening. Which presents us with an unprecedented strategic dilemma," Marcus observed quietly. "Do we take advantage of the hegemony's distraction to press our offensive, or do we consider the possibility that this new threat poses a danger to all galactic civilizations?" Ambassador Tvex's projection flickered as he consulted additional data. "The Galactic Council is requesting an emergency session to address exactly that question. Your joint command has become the most effective military force in the galaxy. Your input will be crucial in determining our response." After Tvex ended the communication, the briefing room fell into contemplative silence. Keitha found herself studying Marcus, watching as he processed the implications of this new development. She had learned to read his expressions well enough to recognize when he was wrestling with a decision that carried enormous moral weight. "You are considering alliance with the hegemony," she said, her observation carrying no judgment. Marcus's smile was rueful. "Am I that transparent? To me, perhaps. Your tactical mind sees the larger strategic picture, but your moral principles resist cooperating with those who have caused so much suffering. Marcus stood and walked to the viewport, staring out at the training exercises that continued in blissful ignorance of the developing crisis. The hegemony has destroyed entire civilizations, enslaved billions of sentient beings, and shown no mercy to anyone who opposes them. Every instinct I have says to let them face this new threat alone. But Keitha prompted, joining him at the viewport. But if this extragalactic force is powerful enough to concern the hegemony, then it represents a threat to everything we have built here. Our alliance, the freedom we have fought to preserve, the future we are creating together, all of it could be destroyed if we allow ourselves to be conquered piecemeal. Keitha placed her hand on his shoulder, feeling the tension in his muscles. There is another consideration as well. If we can forge cooperation between our forces and the hegemony, even temporarily, we demonstrate that reconciliation is possible even between the bitterest enemies. Marcus turned to face her, his expression softening as he looked into her eyes. You continue to surprise me with your wisdom. A year ago, you were a sheltered princess. Now you are thinking like a galactic statesman. I had an excellent teacher, she replied, her bioluminescence shifting to warm, affectionate patterns. Someone who showed me that strength and compassion are not mutually exclusive. Their moment of intimacy was interrupted by another urgent communication. This time, the caller was entirely unexpected. Grand Admiral Vortek of the Hegemony Navy, the same commander who had overseen the attack on Vowed Prime. The holographic projection showed a massive Crothery in elaborate military regalia, his reptilian features marked by the scars of countless battles. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of absolute command, but also an undertone that Keitha recognized as barely controlled desperation. Admiral Chen, Admiral Keitha, I am requesting immediate audience to discuss matters of mutual survival. Marcus's expression hardened immediately. Grand Admiral Vortek. I admit, I did not expect to hear from you again so soon after your forces defeated Vowed Prime. Vortek's laugh was harsh and bitter. Pride is a luxury for those who have the time to indulge it, Admiral Chen. Current circumstances have made such luxuries irrelevant. Explain, Keitha said, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to command. The approaching extragalactic force has been identified through long-range reconnaissance. They call themselves the Devourers, and their name is disturbingly literal. Every world they conquer is stripped of all biological matter. Every sentient species they encounter is either consumed or converted into biomechanical servants. Marcus exchanged glances with Keitha before responding. And you are proposing what, exactly? Temporary cessation of hostilities between our forces, combined tactical coordination to address the Devourer threat, and establishment of joint defensive positions throughout the galaxy. Vortek paused, then continued with obvious difficulty. I am proposing that sworn enemies become allies of necessity. The audacity of the proposal was staggering. The hegemony, which had spent decades conquering and enslaving other species, was now requesting alliance with those same species to face a common threat. Grand Admiral, Keitha said carefully, you are asking us to trust those who have given us every reason to distrust them. What assurance can you offer that this is not simply another hegemony stratagem? Vortek's expression grew grim. Admiral Keitha, I offer you the most compelling assurance possible. If the Devourers succeed in their conquest, there will be no hegemony left to continue any stratagems. We face extinction as a species, just as you do. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his mind clearly racing through the strategic implications. Grand Admiral, assuming we were to consider such an alliance, what would you propose in terms of command structure and tactical coordination? Joint command of all allied forces, with operational decisions made by consensus between senior commanders from each participating faction. Full sharing of intelligence and technological resources. Coordinated defensive positions that maximize the strengths of all participating forces. The proposal was remarkably reasonable, Keitha realized. More than reasonable, it was exactly what she would have suggested if she had been in Vortek's position. Which raised the question of whether the Devourer threat was even more serious than initial intelligence had suggested. We will need to consult with our allies and the Galactic Council, Marcus said finally. This decision cannot be made unilaterally. Understood, Admiral Chen. But please understand that time is a factor we cannot afford to waste. Long-range projections indicate the Devourer fleet will reach the galactic rim within 6 months. If we are to coordinate effective defenses, we must begin immediately. After Vortex communication ended, Marcus and Keitha stood in silence, contemplating the magnitude of the decision before them. The fate of galactic civilization might depend on their willingness to trust former enemies and forge an alliance that seemed impossible just hours earlier. "What are you thinking?" Keitha asked softly. Marcus turned to her with an expression that combined determination with uncertainty. "I am thinking that we may be about to discover whether our relationship can serve as a model for reconciliation on a galactic scale." The emergency session of the Galactic Council was held via holographic conference, with representatives from dozens of species gathering in virtual space to address the crisis. The debate was intense and often heated, with species that had suffered under hegemony rule arguing passionately against any form of alliance. Keitha found herself serving as a voice of moderation, drawing on her diplomatic training to find common ground between opposing viewpoints. Her marriage to Marcus had given her unique insight into how former enemies could become allies, and she used that experience to argue for the possibility of redemption even for the hegemony. "Honored representatives," she said during a particularly contentious moment, "we must consider the difference between justice and survival. Justice demands that the hegemony pay for their crimes against peaceful civilizations. But survival demands that we set aside our desire for justice long enough to address this existential threat." The Altarian delegate, whose people had suffered particularly brutal treatment under hegemony rule, responded with obvious anger. "Admiral Keitha, you speak of setting aside justice as if it were a minor consideration. How can we trust those who have shown no mercy to show mercy now?" Marcus stepped forward, his expression grave but determined. "Because, Delegate Korin, the alternative is extinction for all of us. The enemy of my enemy may not become my friend, but they can become my ally until our common enemy is defeated." The debate continued for hours, but, eventually, pragmatism won over principle. The vote to establish a temporary alliance with the hegemony passed by a narrow margin, with strict conditions for monitoring and verification of hegemony compliance. As the council session concluded, Ambassador Tvex approached Marcus and Keitha privately. "Admirals, the council has decided to place you in overall command of the Allied forces. Your joint command structure has proven most effective, and your relationship demonstrates that cooperation between former enemies is possible." The magnitude of the responsibility was overwhelming. They would be commanding not just human and Zephyrian forces, but military units from dozens of species, including their former hegemony enemies. Success would mean preservation of galactic freedom. Failure would mean extinction for all sentient life in the galaxy. 3 weeks later, Keitha stood in the command center of the massive space station that had been constructed at the galactic coordinates chosen for their defensive stand. Around her, representatives from species that had been at war for decades worked side by side, unified by the threat approaching from beyond the stars. The station itself was a monument to unprecedented cooperation. Human adaptability had combined with Zephyrian elegance, hegemony industrial capacity, and technological innovations from dozens of allied species to create a defensive platform unlike anything in galactic history. "Incoming transmission from Forward Reconnaissance," announced the communication officer, a young Altarian whose people had only recently agreed to work alongside hegemony forces. The tactical display activated to show the lead scout ship, a joint crewed vessel that represented the pinnacle of their cooperative efforts. The ship's captain was Commander Tnal, a Vorthan who had previously served in hegemony forces but had requested assignment to the Allied fleet. "Admiral Keitha, Admiral Chen," Tnal's voice carried across the command center with barely controlled excitement, "we have visual contact with the Devourer fleet. Transmitting data now." What appeared on the tactical display defied every assumption about space warfare that any of the assembled species had developed. The Devourer vessels were not ships in any conventional sense, they were living organisms the size of dreadnoughts, their surfaces pulsing with what appeared to be biological processes. More disturbing still, the creatures seemed to be connected by energy patterns that suggested they operated as a single, vast organism. "Estimated numbers?" Marcus asked, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were facing. Over 3,000 individual organisms, Admiral. They appear to be organized into subgroups that function as specialized organs within the larger organism. Keitha felt her bioluminescence shift to patterns of deep concern. Commander Tnal, are you detecting any conventional technology? Weapons, shields, propulsion systems? Negative, Admiral. Everything appears to be biological in nature, but operating at energy levels that exceed our most powerful technological systems. Grand Admiral Vortek's voice joined the communication from his own flagship. This confirms our worst intelligence estimates. We are not facing a conventional military force. We are facing a predatory organism that has evolved to consume entire galaxies. The implications were staggering. Everything their combined forces had prepared for ship-to-ship combat, siege warfare, defensive formations, was based on assumptions about enemy capabilities that might be completely irrelevant. Admiral Chen, Admiral Keitha, came another voice from the communication system. This is Dr. Elixa from the Joint Research Station. We have completed analysis of the biological samples recovered from the outer rim. The results are significant. Marcus activated the research station's communication channel. Proceed, Doctor. The devourer organisms appear to be vulnerable to specific types of quantum disruption. Our preliminary tests suggest that coordinated quantum resonance patterns could interfere with their biological processes. Keitha felt a spark of hope. What kind of quantum resonance patterns? The type that would be generated by the combination of human quantum manipulation technology, Zephyrian crystalline resonators, and hegemony dark energy projectors. Separately, none of our technologies would be effective. Together, they could create quantum interference patterns that disrupt devourer biological functions. Marcus and Keitha exchanged glances that carried volumes of communication. Once again, their alliance was proving that cooperation between different species could create capabilities that none possessed alone. Doctor, how quickly can we implement quantum resonance weapons across the combined fleet? With full cooperation from all allied engineering teams, approximately 4 weeks, Admiral. We have 3 weeks before the devourers reach our defensive perimeter, Vortek interjected grimly. Engineering teams will need to work around the clock. As the command center erupted into coordinated activity, with engineering teams from dozens of species beginning the most ambitious technological integration in galactic history, Keitha found herself reflecting on how far they had all come. The desperate alliance between former enemies had become something more than military necessity. Working together against an existential threat had created genuine bonds of respect and understanding between species that had been at war for generations. Humans were learning Zephyrian engineering principles, while Zephyrian scientists were adapting human innovation methodologies. Even former hegemony forces were contributing knowledge and resources with genuine commitment to the common cause. Keitha, Marcus said quietly, drawing her aside from the bustling activity around them, are you prepared for what is coming? She looked into his brown eyes, seeing the weight of responsibility they both carried. Are any of us prepared to stake the existence of galactic civilization on an untested weapon technology? Marcus's smile was rueful. When you put it that way, it does sound rather overwhelming. Keitha moved closer to him, her bioluminescence shifting to patterns of affection and determination. Marcus, whatever happens in the coming battle, I want you to know that these months with you have been the most meaningful of my life. You have shown me possibilities I never imagined. Marcus reached out to take her hand, a gesture that had become natural between them despite the vast differences in their backgrounds. Keitha, you have taught me that strength and compassion can coexist, that former enemies can become allies, and that love can grow even in the midst of war. Whatever happens, we face it together. Their moment of intimacy was interrupted by an urgent alarm. All senior commanders to battle stations, announced the station's AI system. Devourer fleet has accelerated approach velocity. Contact in 72 hours. As they moved toward their command positions, Keitha realized that the next 3 days would determine not just the fate of their alliance, but the future of all sentient life in the galaxy. Everything they had built together, their marriage, their military partnership, their unprecedented cooperation between former enemies, would be tested against a threat unlike anything the galaxy had ever faced. The final preparation proceeded with desperate efficiency. Engineering teams worked without rest to integrate quantum resonance technology into the weapons systems of over 2,000 Allied vessels. The technical challenges were enormous. Each species' technology operated on different principles, and creating coherent quantum interference required precise coordination across vast distances. Catha found herself coordinating not just military preparations, but also the delicate diplomatic balance required to maintain cooperation between former enemies. Tensions ran high as the approaching threat made everyone's nerves increasingly frayed. Old grudges and cultural misunderstandings threatened to undermine their alliance just when unity was most crucial. Admiral Catha, reported Commander Hayes, "We have completed quantum resonance integration on 87% of Allied vessels. The remaining ships are experiencing technical difficulties with technology compatibility." Marcus looked up from his own tactical planning. "What kind of difficulties?" "Primarily with older hegemony vessels, Admiral. Their dark energy projectors operate on frequencies that interfere with human quantum manipulation systems." Before Marcus could respond, Grand Admiral Vortex's voice joined their communication. "Admiral Chen, I have a proposal that may resolve the technical difficulties." The holographic projection showed the massive Crothery commander, but his expression carried a humility that would have been unthinkable just months earlier. "Our older vessels can be reconfigured to serve as quantum resonance amplifiers rather than direct weapons platforms. They would coordinate the quantum interference patterns generated by your more advanced vessels." Marcus considered the proposal carefully. That would place hegemony vessels in supporting roles rather than primary combat positions. "Are your crews prepared for that?" Vortex's laugh was bitter but genuine. "Admiral Chen, my crews are prepared to do whatever is necessary to ensure that there are still crews to serve in the future. Pride is irrelevant when facing extinction." As the hours